I used to think I had it all figured out. Living in Boston's cozy Roslindale neighborhood, Daniel and I had carved out our own little piece of paradise in a modest two-story colonial that had character written into every creaky floorboard. The morning sun would stream through our kitchen window, casting warm patterns on the butcher block counter where I'd rest my coffee mug, one hand absent-mindedly stroking my 7-month pregnant belly. We weren't rich, but we were happy, or at least I thought we were. That Wednesday evening in October started like any other. The maple trees lining our street were showing off their autumn colors, and the crisp air carried the scent of someone's fireplace. I was putting the finishing touches on a pot of my grandmother's famous chicken noodle soup when I heard Daniel's key in the front door. He usually came home from his accounting job at Deloitte around 6, typically tired, but always ready with a kiss and a "how are my girls doing?" But this time was different. He burst through the door with an energy I hadn't seen since our wedding day 4 years ago. His blue eyes were bright, and his usually neat brown hair was windswept, as if he'd been running his fingers through it repeatedly in excitement. "Sarah," he called out, not even bothering to take off his coat. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this." He found me in the kitchen, grabbed my hands, and spun me around, carefully, mindful of my bump. "I won. I actually won." "Won what?" I laughed, caught up in his enthusiasm despite my confusion. The soup was starting to bubble over, but I couldn't look away from his face. "Remember that charity raffle at work? The one for Children's Hospital." He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket with trembling hands. "First prize. $1 million, Sarah. 1 million. I felt my knees go weak, and Daniel guided me to one of our second-hand kitchen chairs. "Are you serious?" I whispered, staring at the envelope. That's life-changing," he finished, kneeling beside me. "Think about it. We can finally buy a bigger house, set up the perfect nursery for Emma. We'd chosen our daughter's name just last week, after months of playful debate. We can start a college fund, maybe even take that trip to Europe we've always talked about." I started crying, happy tears, hormone tears, overwhelmed tears. Daniel held me, and we spent the next few hours planning our future. We ordered takeout from our favorite Thai place on Center Street, spreading the containers across our small dining table as we dreamed big dreams. Daniel talked about investing some of the money, being smart about it. I thought about finally being able to quit my job as a high school English teacher to focus on the baby. That night, we fell asleep tangled in each other's arms, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But I pushed away that nagging feeling, choosing instead to focus on the miracle we'd been given. The next morning, I woke up alone. That wasn't unusual. Daniel often left early for work. What was unusual was the manila envelope propped against the coffee maker, my name written on it in his familiar handwriting. Inside were divorce papers. I read them 3 times before the words started to make sense. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my favorite mug, watching numbly as it shattered on the floor, coffee spreading like a dark stain across our white tiles. I tried calling Daniel, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried his office, only to be told he'd taken a personal day. It was around noon when he finally came home. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, the divorce papers untouched in front of me, the spilled coffee long dried on the floor. He wouldn't meet my eyes as he walked in, and that's when I knew, really knew, that this was really happening. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice flat and motionless. The man standing in our kitchen was a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I want something different for my life." "Different?" My voice cracked on the word. "What about Emma? What about our plans?" "Last night, you said, last night was a mistake," he cut me off. I got caught up in the moment. But winning that money, it made me realize I have options. Better options. I pressed my hands against my belly, feeling Emma kick as if she could sense my distress. Is there someone else?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "No, this isn't about anyone else. It's about me. What I want. What I deserve. What you deserve." I echoed, anger finally breaking through the shock. "And what about what I deserve? What our daughter deserves?" "I'll pay child support," he said quickly, like he was checking off a box. Whatever the court decides is fair. But I need to do this, Sarah. I need to be free. Free. The word hit me like a physical blow. Free from what? From me? From our life together? From the family we were supposed to be building? I watched in stunned silence as he went upstairs and packed a bag. He was efficient about it, like he'd planned this all out. Maybe he had. Maybe while I was dreaming about nursery colors last night, he was planning his escape. When he came back downstairs, he hesitated for a moment. "I'll have my lawyer contact you," he said, not quite looking at me. "It's better if we don't talk directly for a while." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in our kitchen with broken ceramic at my feet and broken dreams in my heart. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching dust motes in its beam, making everything look surreal, like a scene from someone else's life. I don't remember much about the rest of that day. I know I called in sick to work. I know I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I know I sat in the nursery we'd started setting up, running my fingers over the soft yellow onesie I'd bought last weekend, wondering how life could change so dramatically in less than 24 hours. That night, as I lay in our bed, my bed now, I supposed, I felt Emma moving inside me, strong and alive. She had hiccups, something that had been happening more frequently lately. Each tiny jolt reminded me that even though my world had shattered, I wasn't alone. I had someone to be strong for. "It's just you and me now, baby girl," I whispered into the darkness, my hand resting on my belly. "But we're going to be okay. Somehow, we're going to be okay." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the shadows move across the ceiling, listened to the familiar creaks and groans of our house, and tried to understand how the man who had spun me around in joy could turn into a stranger in less than a day. But understanding wouldn't come, and as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, I made myself a promise. This wouldn't break me. I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way through this. I just didn't know then that this was only the beginning of the story. The next 5 days passed in a blur of unanswered texts and sleepless nights. I moved through our house like a ghost, running my fingers along the walls Daniel and I had painted together last spring. The morning sickness that had finally subsided in my second trimester came back with a vengeance, probably triggered by stress. I couldn't keep much down besides saltine crackers and ginger ale. My phone rang constantly, concerned colleagues from Roslindale High School, friends from our weekend board game group, my mom in Connecticut offering to drive up and stay with me. I let most calls go to voicemail. What could I say? That my husband had abandoned me the day after winning $1 million? That I was 7 months pregnant and suddenly facing single motherhood? The whole thing sounded like a bad Lifetime movie. It was around sunset on the 5th day when my phone lit up with Lara's name. Daniel's younger sister had always been different from the rest of his family, warmer, more genuine. We'd grown close over the years, often meeting for coffee at the local Starbucks to gossip and complain about her mother's passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. I almost didn't answer, but something in me needed to hear a friendly voice, even if it belonged to someone from his family. "Sarah." Lara's voice was hesitant, almost whispered. "Are you alone?" "Yeah," I replied, sinking into the window seat where I used to read on Sunday mornings. "Just me and Emma." There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of Lara's breathing. I need to tell you something. I've been trying to work up the courage for days." My hand instinctively went to my belly, as if to shield Emma from whatever was coming. "What is it?" "It's about Daniel. About why he left." She took a deep breath. It wasn't entirely his decision. Mom, she orchestrated the whole thing. The last rays of sunlight caught the dust motes floating in my living room, making them look like suspended glitter. "What do you mean, orchestrated?" "I was there that night," Lara continued, her words coming faster now. "When Daniel came home to tell Mom about winning the raffle. You know how he always goes to her first with big news. She trained him to do that since we were kids." I did know. Patricia Morrison had always maintained an unnaturally tight grip on her only son, something that had caused more than a few arguments in our marriage. She was drinking her usual gin and tonic when he told her, Lara went on. But instead of being happy for him, For both of you, she got this look in her eyes. The same look she had when she convinced my ex-boyfriend that I was cheating on him in college. My throat tightened. I remembered that incident. Lara had been devastated, and it took years for her to trust anyone again. She started talking to Daniel about destiny and opportunities, about how he was meant for greater things than a small house in Roslindale and a wife who teaches high school English. Lara's voice cracked. She told him he could move into her place in Beacon Hill, that with his new money he could finally live the life she always wanted for him. She made it sound like she was saving him from me. I finished, my voice hollow. She called you a gold digger, Lara spat out. Said you'd probably gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him. That you'd bleed him dry if he stayed. She worked on him for hours, Sarah. I watched her pour drink after drink, twisting everything around until black was white and up was down. The room was spinning slightly. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass. Why didn't you say anything? I tried. The pain in her voice was raw. I told Daniel he was being ridiculous, that you two were perfect together. But Mom, she's always known exactly which buttons to push with him. She brought up his father. That made my breath catch. Daniel's father had abandoned them when he was 10, running off with his secretary and their family savings. It was his deepest wound, one that Patricia had picked at and infected over the years, using it to keep Daniel close, dependent on her approval. She said he was finally in a position to be better than his father ever was, Lara continued. That staying with you would hold him back, just like her marriage held back his father. She convinced him that leaving now, before Emma is born, would be kinder than staying out of obligation. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Patricia had always been manipulative, but this was a new level of calculated malice. There's more, Lara said, her voice dropping even lower. She's already set him up with the daughter of one of her country club friends, some investment banker named Madison. They had dinner together last night at L'Espalier. The nausea hit me hard and fast. I barely made it to the powder room in time. When I came back to the phone, Lara was still there, crying softly. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have told you sooner. But Mom, she threatened to cut me off completely if I interfered. I know that sounds shallow, but my student loans. It's okay, I said automatically, though nothing was okay. You're telling me now. She's already having him look at penthouses downtown, Lara added. She's acting like this is all normal, like she didn't just help destroy her son's marriage and family. Dad would be rolling in his grave if he could see what she's done. I thought about Patricia Morrison, with her perfectly highlighted hair and tennis club membership, her constant complaints about our modest lifestyle, her thinly veiled disappointment that I'd chosen teaching over a more lucrative career. All those times she'd questioned our decisions, to buy in Roslindale instead of a more upscale neighborhood, to start a family before Daniel made partner, to keep working instead of being a proper wife. Sarah, Lara's voice brought me back to the present. What are you going to do? I looked around the room, at the family photos I still hadn't taken down, at the ultrasound picture proudly displayed on our mantel, at the morning light catching the simple gold band I still wore on my left hand. Something shifted inside me, harder than Emma's usual kicks. It felt like resolve. First, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I'm going to call my lawyer. Your lawyer. Lara sounded surprised. Do you have one? A bitter laugh escaped me. Remember last Christmas, when your mother spent the whole dinner talking about her friend's daughter who'd lost everything in her divorce? How she kept looking at me while she told that story. Yeah, well, it made me think. So I found a good lawyer. Just in case. I didn't tell her about the other precautions I'd taken, the documents I'd secured, the plans I'd made. Patricia wasn't the only one who could think ahead. They're not going to get away with this, I said, and for the first time in 5 days, I felt something other than despair. It wasn't quite anger, and it wasn't quite determination. It was something in between, something with teeth. I should go, Lara said quickly. Mom's expecting me for dinner. But Sarah, be careful, okay? When she feels threatened, she gets dangerous. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, one hand on my belly, feeling Emma's reassuring movements. Patricia Morrison thought she could orchestrate my downfall like one of her charity galas. She thought she knew all the players, controlled all the pieces. But she'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I reached for my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. As it rang, I walked to my home office and opened the small safe hidden behind a framed copy of The Road Not Taken, a little literary humor I'd thought clever when I installed it. Jennifer Morgan's office, a crisp voice answered. "This is Sarah Collins," I said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "I need to speak with Jennifer about my prenuptial agreement. It's urgent." As I hung up, I could almost hear Patricia's voice in my head, smug and superior. "You should always plan ahead, dear." For once, I agreed with her completely. Jennifer Morgan's office was exactly as I remembered it, all gleaming mahogany and leather-bound law books, with a view of Boston Common that probably cost more per square foot than my entire house. I sat in one of her plush client chairs, the prenuptial agreement spread out on the desk between us, while she read through it with practiced efficiency. "You are smart," she said finally, looking up at me over her reading glasses. "Very smart. Most people don't think to include lottery winnings and unexpected financial gains in their prenups." I smiled slightly, remembering the day I'd insisted on this clause. It was 3 weeks before our wedding, and Patricia had been hovering over Daniel's shoulder as he reviewed the document in this very office. "Surely this isn't necessary," she'd said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It shows such a lack of trust." But I'd stood my ground, thinking of my grandfather's house, the only real asset I brought into the marriage. My grandfather worked his whole life to pay off that house, I told Jennifer now, shifting uncomfortably in my chair to accommodate my growing belly. He was a janitor at MIT for 40 years. When he left it to me in his will, he made me promise I'd protect it. Jennifer nodded, turning to page 4 of the agreement. "And protect it you did. This clause is crystal clear. Any winnings, inheritances, or unexpected financial gains during the marriage are to be considered joint marital property, regardless of which party received them." Patricia thought she was being clever, I continued, feeling a flutter of movement from Emma. She convinced Daniel to sign it because, at the time, I was the only one with any real assets to protect. She probably thought she was humoring the paranoid girl from the wrong side of the tracks. People often overlook what's right in front of them when they're blinded by their own prejudices, Jennifer mused, making a note in her legal pad. "Have you told Daniel about this yet?" I shook my head. "He hasn't exactly been taking my calls. But I did notice he and his mother have been quite busy." I pulled out my phone and showed her the social media posts Laura had sent me, Daniel and Patricia at expensive restaurants, shopping at high-end stores on Newberry Street, touring luxury condos in Back Bay. "They're spending money like they've forgotten the basic rule of marriage law in Massachusetts," Jennifer said dryly. "Everything acquired during the marriage is subject to equitable distribution, even without your prenup. Add in this agreement, and their position is even weaker." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "It means," Jennifer said, leaning forward with a glint in her eye, "that half of that $1 million is legally yours. And given Daniel's attempt to abandon his pregnant wife without support, we have grounds to ask for more than half in the divorce settlement." I let that sink in for a moment, remembering Patricia's smug face when she'd signed as a witness to our prenup. She'd been so certain she was helping her son protect himself from me, never imagining the document would end up protecting me from them. "There's something else," I said, pulling another document from my bag. "Something I never told anyone about, not even Daniel." Jennifer took the yellowed paper, her eyebrows rising as she read. "This is the original deed to your grandfather's house." I nodded. "When he left it to me, I had it appraised. It turns out that tiny plot of land it sits on? It's worth more than the house itself. A developer has been trying to buy up property in that area for years. They offered me 7 figures last spring, but I turned them down because it was your home with Daniel," Jennifer finished softly. "Yeah." I blinked back tears. "Stupid, right?" "Not stupid," Jennifer said firmly. "Human. But now I'm thinking maybe it's time to listen to that developer's offer, I said. Especially since I know exactly how to make Patricia Morrison's head explode. Jennifer's lips twitched. Do tell. That land developer? It's the same one that's been trying to buy the property where her precious tennis club sits. She's been leading the charge to block the sale, talking about preserving the character of the neighborhood. I couldn't keep the satisfaction out of my voice. Imagine how she'll feel when she realizes her former daughter-in-law is about to become a key player in that deal. Jennifer actually laughed out loud. You really have thought of everything, haven't you? I've had a lot of sleepless nights, I admitted, and a very active child who likes to kick me awake to plot revenge. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Laura. Mom's taking Dee to look at a Ferrari tomorrow. Says it's time he started living like a wealthy man. I showed the message to Jennifer. They really have no idea, do they? Often, the people who think they're the smartest in the room are the ones who make the biggest mistakes, Jennifer said, gathering the documents into a folder. Would you like me to set everything in motion? I took a deep breath, thinking about Daniel's cold goodbye, about Patricia's years of subtle undermining, about the family they were trying to destroy before it even had a chance to begin. Yes, I said firmly. But first, I want to make a call. Jennifer raised an eyebrow as I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd saved months ago. It rang twice before a professional voice answered. Boston Development Partners, this is Michael Chen speaking. Mr. Chen? This is Sarah Collins. We spoke last spring about my property in Roslindale. I'm wondering if your offer still stands. There was a pause, then what sounded like papers shuffling. Mrs. Collins. Yes, of course. In fact, given recent market changes, we might be able to improve on our previous offer. I caught Jennifer's approving nod. I'm very happy to hear that. And please, call me Sarah. I think we're going to be doing a lot of business together. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in days. What's our next step? Jennifer was already typing on her computer. First, we file a response to Daniel's divorce petition, including the prenup and a detailed accounting of assets. Then we request an emergency hearing for temporary support, given your condition. We'll also file an injunction to prevent him from disposing of any of the lottery winnings until the court can rule on the division of assets. And Patricia? She's not a party to the divorce, Jennifer said, but if we can prove she deliberately interfered with your marriage and encouraged Daniel to abandon his pregnant wife, we might have grounds for a separate civil suit. I thought about that for a moment. Let's hold that card for now. Something tells me watching her son lose half his newfound wealth will be punishment enough. As you wish. Jennifer finished typing and turned back to me. Sarah, I have to ask, are you sure you want to sell your grandfather's house? Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. I looked out the window at the Boston skyline, thinking about the home I'd shared with Daniel. Every corner held memories, some beautiful, some now painfully tainted. The house was my grandfather's dream, I said finally. But maybe it's time for me to build my own. For Emma and me. Jennifer smiled. Then let's make sure you have everything you need to do exactly that. As I left her office, I felt Emma kick particularly hard, as if she was offering her own opinion on our plans. I know, baby girl, I whispered, patting my belly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. My phone buzzed again as I waited for the elevator. Another text from Laura. Mom's planning a party to celebrate Daniel's good fortune. Should I send you the guest list? I smiled as I typed my response. No need. Something tells me they won't be in a party mood much longer. The morning Daniel's picture appeared in the Boston Globe's Society section, I was sitting in my doctor's waiting room for my 32-week checkup. The photo showed him and Patricia at the Ritz-Carlton's champagne brunch, both grinning like they'd just won the lottery, which, technically, they had. Or thought they had. Recent charity raffle winner Daniel Collins celebrates with Mother Patricia Morrison at the Ritz-Carlton Boston, read the caption. I noticed he'd already dropped my last name, reverting to his mother's maiden name. Classic Patricia move. Mrs. Collins? The nurse called, and I tucked the newspaper into my bag, suppressing a small smile. He might have dropped my name, but I was still very much a Collins, at least for now. Dr. Martinez was her usual cheerful self as she measured my growing belly. "Everything looks perfect, Sarah. Emma's right on track, and your blood pressure is surprisingly good considering the circumstances." "I've been keeping busy," I said, watching the ultrasound screen as Emma showed off her newest somersault skills. "So I've heard." Dr. Martinez's eyes twinkled. "My husband works at the courthouse. He mentioned there's quite an interesting case coming up." I wasn't surprised word had gotten around. Boston's legal community wasn't that large, and a case involving a $1 million lottery ticket and a pregnant wife was bound to create buzz. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Jennifer Morgan. "Check your email." Now. I waited until I was back in my car to open the message. Attached was a video clip from that morning's local news broadcast. There was Daniel, standing outside the Ferrari dealership in Norwood, Patricia hovering at his elbow like a proud stage mother. "It's about living the life I deserve," he was saying to the reporter, all white teeth and expensive new haircut. "Sometimes you have to make hard choices to move forward." The camera caught Patricia nodding sagely beside him, her tennis bracelet catching the sunlight. "Daniel's always been destined for greater things," she added, patting his arm possessively. The next email was from Jennifer's paralegal. Daniel had been served with the divorce response and prenup documents 20 minutes after that interview. I started my car, but instead of heading home, I drove to the small cafe near Jamaica Pond where Lara and I used to meet. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone rang with her number. "Are you watching Channel 5? She asked without preamble. "They're doing a live update from the Ferrari dealership. Daniel just got the papers." I pulled into the cafe parking lot. "How's it going?" Mom's face turned the exact color of her Hermes scarf. "You know, that hideous orange one? Daniel looks like someone just told him Santa isn't real." Lara's voice was gleeful. "He's trying to leave, but there are reporters everywhere. Apparently, someone tipped them off about the prenup." "How mysterious," I said, ordering my decaf latte. The barista, who knew my usual order, gave me a sympathetic smile. The story had been all over local social media. "Oh God," Lara gasped. Mom just tried to grab the papers from Daniel's hands, but she tripped on her Louboutins. She's yelling at the cameraman to stop filming. This is better than reality TV. I settled into my favorite window seat, the one overlooking the pond. "Lara, maybe you shouldn't be watching this. She's still your mother. Please. After what she did to you. To her own grandchild? I'm treating myself to front row seats to her. Downfall. Oh, hold on. Daniel's trying to make a statement." I could hear the chaos in the background, reporters shouting questions, Patricia's shrill voice demanding everyone leave, the slam of car doors. "Sarah." It was Daniel's voice now, distant like Lara was holding the phone away from her ear. "Sarah, if you're watching this, we need to talk. Please call me. This is all a big misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Patricia's voice cut through. "This is manipulation. She planned this. She's trying to steal your money." I heard Lara snort. "Yeah, because Sarah's the one who abandoned her pregnant wife the day after winning the lottery." The media circus continued to unfold across various platforms throughout the day. By evening, #LotteryDivorce was trending on Boston Twitter, with people taking sides and sharing their own stories of pregnancy abandonment and greedy in-laws. Around sunset, my phone lit up with a series of texts from Daniel. "Can we please talk about this? You're being unreasonable. That prenup wasn't meant for this kind of situation. My lawyer says we can challenge it. Sarah, please. Think about what you're doing." I showed the messages to Emma's latest ultrasound photo, propped up on my kitchen counter. "What do you think, baby girl? Should we respond?" As if in answer, my phone rang again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. It was Michael Chin from Boston Development Partners. "Sarah, I hope I'm not calling too late. I just wanted to let you know, our board has reviewed your property's location and potential. We're prepared to offer 20% above our last discussion price." I did some quick mental math. "That's just over $1.5 million, he confirmed. "Plus, we'd like to discuss your potential involvement in the larger development project. Your knowledge of the neighborhood and community connections could be valuable to us." I thought about Patricia's tennis club, about all those times she'd looked down her nose at my little house and teaching career. I'm definitely interested, Mr. Chen. When can we meet? Would tomorrow morning work? Say, 10 a.m. at our downtown office? I agreed, and after hanging up, I finally responded to Daniel's texts with a single message. All communication should go through our lawyers. Jennifer Morgan's office is expecting to hear from your counsel. The response was immediate. Don't do this, Sarah. Mom says we can fight the prenup. She knows people. I laughed out loud at that. Patricia Morrison and her country club connections versus Jennifer Morgan's 20 years of family law experience. I almost wished I could sell tickets to that showdown. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Mrs. Kennedy from next door, holding one of her famous lasagnas. I saw the news, she said, pressing the dish into my hands. And I wanted you to know. The whole neighborhood's behind you, dear. That man and his mother don't know what they're up against. I felt tears prick my eyes, the first I'd cried since leaving Jennifer's office. Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy. You know what my mother used to say? She patted my arm. The best revenge is a life well lived. And maybe a good lawyer, she added with a wink. Later that night, as I enjoyed Mrs. Kennedy's lasagna and watched the evening news replay Daniel's disastrous Ferrari dealership appearance, I felt Emma doing her usual bedtime acrobatics. I know, baby, I said, rubbing my belly. It's been quite a day. But guess what? Mommy just became a millionaire too. And unlike some people, she did it the smart way, by believing in herself and planning ahead. My phone buzzed one last time. Another text from Daniel. Mom's threatening to sue you for emotional distress. She says you've humiliated our family. I thought about the development deal waiting for me tomorrow, about the prenup that Patricia had dismissed so easily, about the strength I'd found in the midst of their betrayal. No, Daniel, I whispered to my phone, though I didn't bother texting back. Your mother humiliated your family all by herself. I'm just making sure we get the last laugh. The Suffolk County Courthouse was packed on the morning of our hearing. I sat beside Jennifer Morgan, trying to look calmer than I felt at 34 weeks pregnant. The wooden benches were uncomfortable, but I'd chosen to wear my grandmother's pearl necklace for strength. She'd always said pearls made a woman look like she knew something others didn't. Daniel and his lawyer sat at the opposite table, with Patricia directly behind them in the gallery, wearing what looked like a new Chanel suit. She kept whispering in Daniel's ear, causing his lawyer, a young man who looked fresh out of law school, to repeatedly ask her to be quiet. Judge Eleanor Martinez, no relation to my doctor, though they shared the same no-nonsense attitude, called the court to order. Before we begin, she said, adjusting her reading glasses, I want to note that this case has attracted considerable public attention. Let me be clear, this courtroom is not a theater for social media drama. We are here to determine the equitable distribution of assets in accordance with Massachusetts law. Patricia shifted audibly in her seat. I could practically feel her eye roll. Now, Judge Martinez continued, regarding the prenuptial agreement submitted by Mrs. Collins's counsel. Daniel's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, we contest the validity of that document. It was signed under duress, and my client wasn't properly advised of its implications. Jennifer calmly raised her hand. Your Honor, we have statements from the original witnesses, including Mrs. Morrison herself, confirming that all parties had independent legal counsel and signed willingly. We also have the billing records from both attorneys who advised on the agreement. Judge Martinez nodded. I've reviewed those documents. Mr. Peterson, do you have any evidence of duress beyond your client's current regret at having signed? The young lawyer fumbled with his papers. Well, Your Honor, the circumstances. The circumstances, Jennifer interrupted smoothly, were that my client wanted to protect her inherited property. The agreement was written to be mutually beneficial, covering all assets and winnings acquired during the marriage. Mr. Collins and his mother both agreed it was reasonable at the time. I heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath. Clearly, she hadn't expected Jennifer to mention her involvement so directly. Furthermore, Jennifer continued, we have evidence that Mr. Collins's abandonment of his pregnant wife was premeditated and coordinated with third parties to deliberately deprive her of marital assets. She produced a stack of documents, printouts of text messages, emails, and bank statements showing the rapid movement of the lottery winnings into new accounts opened the day before Daniel left. The judge's expression darkened as she reviewed the evidence. Mr. Peterson, was your client aware that attempting to hide marital assets is a serious offense in this court? Daniel's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Honor, my client was acting on advice from family members. He's prepared to make things right. Make things right? Patricia's voice cut through the courtroom. This is highway robbery. She's trying to steal my son's money. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Martinez said sharply, you are here as an observer only. One more outburst and you'll be removed from my courtroom. Patricia subsided, but I could see her face turning that dangerous shade of red that usually preceded one of her legendary tantrums. The hearing continued with detailed discussions of assets, including not just the lottery winnings, but also my pending real estate deal with Boston Development Partners. When Michael Chen's affidavit about the property value was read into evidence, I heard Patricia's strangled gasp. You're selling to them? She hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Those vultures who want to destroy our neighborhood? Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Mrs. Morrison, this is your final warning. But Patricia was beyond warnings. She stood up, designer handbag clutched like a weapon. This was her plan all along. She's not just trying to steal Daniel's money, she's trying to destroy our whole community. That house was nothing before Daniel married her. She's just a gold-digging teacher who, bailiff, Judge Martinez interrupted, please escort Mrs. Morrison from the courtroom. As the bailiff approached, Patricia turned to Daniel. Do something. Tell them about her family. Tell them about her father in prison. The courtroom went silent. I felt Jennifer stiffen beside me, but I just smiled. My father served 18 months for protesting nuclear power plants in the 80s, I said clearly. He taught me that standing up for what's right is worth any price. I'm proud of him. Patricia deflated slightly, her attempt at scandal falling flat. As the bailiff led her out, I heard her still protesting, but she's ruining everything. Daniel, don't let her. The heavy doors closed, cutting off her voice. Judge Martinez took off her glasses and looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Collins, do you have anything to say before I make my ruling? Daniel stood slowly, and for the first time since this all began, he looked me in the eye. What I saw there wasn't anger or hatred, just a deep, exhausted confusion, as if he was finally waking up from a long nightmare. He started, then stopped. The money, it made everything seem possible, Mom said. He shook his head. I've been an idiot, haven't I? That's not a legal term, Judge Martinez said dryly, but I appreciate your honesty. Please be seated. Her ruling was decisive. The prenuptial agreement was valid and enforceable. The lottery winnings would be split equally. Additionally, given the circumstances of Daniel's abandonment and my pregnancy, he would be required to pay substantial support and all medical expenses related to the birth. Mrs. Collins, the judge added, regarding your real estate transaction, while this court has no jurisdiction over your inherited property, I commend your business acumen. Too often, people let emotions cloud their judgment in these situations. You've demonstrated remarkable clarity of purpose. As we left the courthouse, reporters clustered on the steps called out questions. Jennifer fielded most of them while I waited by the car, one hand on my belly, feeling Emma's reassuring movements. Daniel caught up to me before I could leave. Sarah, wait. Please. I turned, noting how his expensive new suit couldn't quite hide how tired he looked. What is it, Daniel? I'm sorry, he said quietly. I got caught up in Mom's dreams, in what she always wanted for me. I forgot about what I wanted, what we had. And what did we have, Daniel? I asked, genuinely curious. He gestured helplessly. A good life. A real life. Before the money made everything crazy. I thought about our cozy house, our game nights with friends, the simple joy of planning our baby's future together. The money didn't make anything crazy, I said gently. It just showed us who people really are. Mom's going to be impossible after this, he said, running a hand through his hair. Especially when she finds out about the development deal. That's not my problem anymore, I reminded him. She's your mother, Daniel. Your choice whether to keep letting her run your life. He nodded slowly. Can I? Would it be okay if I came to the hospital? When Emma's born. I considered this. Let's talk about it after she arrives. Through our lawyers, I added, seeing hope spark in his eyes. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, Daniel. But maybe we can build something new. Something better for Emma. As my Uber pulled away from the courthouse, I saw Daniel still standing there, looking lost. Patricia was nowhere to be seen, though later I heard she'd given quite a performance for the local news, complete with tears and accusations of conspiracy. But none of that mattered anymore. The price of greed had been paid in full, and I was ready to start the next chapter of my life, this time on my own terms. Emma Catherine Collins arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, 2 weeks earlier than expected, but perfect in every way. She had my dark hair, Daniel's blue eyes, and a determined little chin that was all her own. As I held her for the first time in the delivery room at Massachusetts General Hospital, the last few months seemed to fade away, replaced by something bigger and more important than any drama or revenge. Laura was my birthing partner, proving herself worth her weight in gold during the 14 hours of labor. She documented everything with photos and videos, carefully avoiding any that showed me looking less than presentable, just in case these end up as evidence somewhere, she joked, though we both knew her mother well enough to take the precautions seriously. Daniel came to the hospital the day after Emma was born, bearing a pink teddy bear and an awkwardness that filled the room. He stood at the foot of my bed, shifting his weight from foot to foot, until I took pity on him and offered to let him hold his daughter. She's so small, he whispered, cradling Emma with an expertise I hadn't expected. And her hands, look at her tiny fingernails. She's perfect, I agreed, watching them together with a bittersweet ache in my chest. This was what we were supposed to have, what his mother's manipulation and his own weakness had destroyed. I've been seeing a therapist, he said suddenly, still looking at Emma. Trying to understand everything. Why I let mom control me for so long. Why I threw away the best things in my life for some fantasy of what she thought I deserved. I didn't respond. These conversations belonged in his therapy sessions, not in my hospital room. Sarah, he continued, finally looking at me, I know I can't fix what I broke. But I want to be a good father to Emma. Whatever that looks like, however you want to handle it, I'm willing to do the work. It was the first time since this all began that I heard real sincerity in his voice. We'll figure it out, I said. One day at a time. The next few weeks were a blur of newborn schedules, midnight feedings, and settling into our new reality. I'd closed on the sale of my grandfather's house just before Emma's birth, using part of the proceeds to buy a sunny 3-bedroom condo in Jamaica Plain. The rest, combined with my share of the lottery winnings, went into investment accounts, some for Emma's future, some for the new consulting business I was building with Boston Development Partners. Patricia, true to form, hadn't gone quietly. She'd tried to challenge the court's ruling, filed complaints against Jennifer Morgan, and even attempted to contest my real estate sale. None of it worked. The development project was moving forward, with plans that would transform not just the tennis club property, but the entire neighborhood into something more inclusive and community-oriented. You know what the ironic part is? Laura said one afternoon, as she helped me organize Emma's nursery. If Mom hadn't been so horrible to you, none of this would have happened. The club would be safe, Daniel would still be under her thumb, and the neighborhood would stay exactly as exclusive as she likes it. The price of greed, I murmured, folding tiny onesies while Emma slept peacefully in her swing. Speaking of price tags, Laura continued, did you see the for sale sign at Mom's house? Apparently, she's downsizing. Something about the property taxes being too high now that her income has changed. I had heard. The society pages were following Patricia Morrison's financial adjustment with the same enthusiasm they'd shown for her previous social triumphs. The country club set could be ruthless when one of their own fell from grace. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael Chin. Board approved final plans. Press conference next week. Still want to make the announcement. I smiled, thinking of Patricia's face when she learned that her former daughter-in-law would be the public face of the development project she'd fought so hard to prevent. "Absolutely," I texted back. The press conference was held on the tennis club grounds, with local news stations and community leaders in attendance. I stood at the podium, Emma strapped to my chest in her little carrier, and outlined our vision for the neighborhood's future: affordable housing mixed with market-rate units, green spaces, local businesses, and a community center where the tennis club currently stood. "This project isn't about destroying a neighborhood's character," I told the cameras. "It's about expanding it, making room for more stories, more families, more possibilities." The questions afterward were mostly about the technical aspects of the development, but one reporter couldn't resist asking about the personal angle. "Mrs. Collins, some people are calling this revenge against your former mother-in-law. How do you respond to that?" I looked down at Emma, who was contentedly chewing on her fist, completely unaware of the cameras or the drama. "This isn't about revenge," I said honestly. "It's about legacy. The kind of world I want my daughter to grow up in. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to let go of old structures that don't serve the community anymore." Later that evening, as I was giving Emma her bath, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Patricia, sitting alone at a restaurant bar, looking at her phone, probably watching footage of the press conference. She looked smaller somehow, older. The caption read, "Thought you should see this." I didn't respond to Daniel's text, but I did spend some time that night thinking about choices and consequences, about the patterns we inherit and the ones we choose to break. Emma was almost asleep in her crib when another text came through, this one from Jennifer Morgan. "Saw you on the news. Your grandfather would be proud." I touched the pearl necklace I still wore, thinking of my grandfather's little house and all it had taught me about value, real value, not the kind that came with designer labels or country club memberships. "Ready for your story, sweet girl?" I asked Emma, settling into the rocking chair beside her crib. She blinked up at me sleepily as I opened one of her many books. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a young woman who thought she had everything figured out." As I read, I could see the lights of Boston through the nursery window, the city sprawling out before us like a map of possibilities. Tomorrow, I had meetings with contractors and community groups. Next week, the development project would break ground. Next month, Emma would start daycare part-time so I could focus on growing my consulting business. Life wasn't perfect. It never is, but it was real and it was ours. Every choice, every consequence, every new beginning had brought us here, to this moment, to this story we were writing together. And somewhere across the city, in a house that was now too big for one person, Patricia Morrison was learning her own lessons about the price of greed and the value of truth. Sometimes karma doesn't need any help. It just needs time and space to work its magic.